Hi, Brian, and
Howdy,
welcome
Christy.
everyone. Hi. People are still coming in, but I just want to say thank you so much for being here with us. We're so excited to get to do another webinar. I love doing these with you, Brian. They're just so much fun and
It is.
get to
It
share a
really is
little
a
bit of
joy.
our work. Um, I want to just welcome everyone for being here. My name is Christy Kennedy. I'm the Director of Business Development, one of the core developers and co-authors, as Brian, my colleague here is as well, Brian Clement, and of our approach, We Are Resilient. And we're just so excited to have you here today for this webinar, New Year, New You. I want to start though and open with what this webinar is not. We will not be focusing on how to make a New Year's resolution or things that may not be working in your life for personal or professional, but rather focusing on those inner strengths and that resilience that we know you already have within yourself. And by looking at some resilient mindsets, you can look at how you can actually grow or strengthen or engage with your own personal resilience that you already have within you. Our session today, we're going to run about 30 to 35 minutes, 10 minutes or so of Q&A. So please use that Q&A box if you have questions along the way. If you're like, oh, I'm curious about this, go ahead and use that question and answer box, and we will address those questions at the end. If we do not get to your question, we will be sending a follow-up email with resources and happy to share the questions there as well. Without further ado, Brian.
And thank you so much. We are recording, so we will be sending that in the follow-up, just for your awareness. A little bit about us and the company. Dovetail Learning, I have to say it is an honor and pleasure to work with a company that our mission has been for well over a decade, strengthening resilience in adults and children, in service to our team and our team's larger vision of a world of kind, connected human beings. And I say this with deep appreciation. Our team does that every day in very authentic ways, and that's an honor. And it's also a privilege to offer our resources an open educational resource, leading with our values as a company, and this idea that we think equity starts with access, and universal mental health promotion is really where we hope to share and be. And we know that we are one part of the story. And when we say the term open educational resources, that means it's there for you to use, adapt, learn, and apply, and then hopefully share back with us so others can learn from your successes and our little piece of the puzzle. Christy, is there anything I forgot to mention in the preliminaries before I move it on?
Just that you can download any of those open
Great.
education resources at our website. Anything that's downloadable is complete. I mean, any digital access to our work is completely free, as Brian mentioned, and we have an entire page of those resources available.
Perfect. Well, as we mentioned, it's a joy to share with Christy, but who are we? A little bit about me. As we go into 2022, you see there a team shot of me and my family, my 3 kiddos and my wonderful wife. And the theme for us has been strength and thanks in 2022. It is true that our family, our close-in family members, have been going through some significant health related issues. And the centering skill I've been really accessing more than any other in these past holidays since Thanksgiving is gratitude. Because when I hear the stories and things that could be a different way, I just sort of want to celebrate and find strength within the gratitude and joy of being alive and healthy. And so I just want to say that's how I'm framing it. And as a contributing author on this work, I work the skills every day with 3 kiddos and the wife. So it's not just theory, we put it into practice every day. It's a little bit about me.
Thanks, Brian. And a little bit about me. Again, my name's Christy. I've been with Dovetail Learning for about 6 years, just about the same length as you, Brian. I'm pretty sure we came on around the same time. Been a great 6 years, even again, with the joy that we've gotten the last couple of years, getting to collaborate and create this content put out in the world. And for me, my year has been new because we got a puppy, and this is a sense of my strength and my resilient mindsets of curiosity. We'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later. I have to be open to the curiousness of having a dog. My husband and I have never had a dog, and I cannot begin to convey the amount of joy that this little girl, Aurelia, has brought into our life. Every day is a new day, and we just get to go on this adventure. And that's one of my inner strengths for my resilience is being curious and open to that wonder and joy that kind of comes with the new adventure each day, especially with a 10-month-old puppy.
Hard not to be.
Absolutely. And when we talk about resilience at Dovetail Learning, we're going to talk about that as an ordinary superpower. And one of the core foundational elements of the work that we have put into this is that you are resilient. I am resilient. Brian's resilient. I'm pretty sure Aurelia is resilient. And it's something that it comes from inside of us. It's not an external thing. And we love this quote because it is an ordinary superpower. We all have it, as opposed to something we're striving to achieve. And so that's one of the core foundations. And we actually have expanded resilience to a deeper way into 5 distinct types of resilience. We have what we call reactive resilience. Yeah, how we react based on our need for safety in the world. And that's still a part of our resilience. Our personal resilience, how most people speak to resilience, that ability to bounce back, a lot of people will describe it as. But then we also have relational resilience, how your relationships, manage those tough times. And then our group resilience, how a collective, a community, a group of people work together through the ups and downs to achieve their mission and vision. And at last, but certainly not least, our cultural resilience and our cultural patterns that impact not only how we view the world, but also how we react and interact with the world as well. And you can learn about all these types of resilience at our website. And today we'll be exploring some more of the foundations around that, right, Brian?
That's right. And as we offered, and you talked about going back to the beginning of this, one of the things I remember you really focused on is resilience exists in us in a continuum. It's dynamic, and it's something that we can strengthen because it's inside of us. But what can we do to get to that resilience in us or in a group, as you mentioned? And for us, that starts with the resilient mindsets. And I'm using my body as our wonderful former board chair, Di Cullen, has been so gracious to sort of embody this idea as a mindset, something that we can wear to access that continuum. And even when we're not our most resilient self, become more resilient by working our skills. But the access point is in our mindsets. And within our team, we sometimes even have a little bit of push back and forth about, is it one mindset, like one hat, or is this a series of hats that we can put on? But we all agree that it starts at the beginning with curiosity. And even this image, sort of meeting the moment without cause or reactivity, is that with that curiosity, I can start to ask myself, what don't I know, or how am I being? So that there's opportunity within that curiosity. Once I sort of filter through the different dimensions of my curiosity about what's occurring to me, how it's occurring, what I'm feeling, then I can start to move in and forward through the idea of finding agency and choice in this particular situation, right? The idea that there's a lot of opportunities, some of which sit outside of my control and some are in my control. And that's where that sort of discernment is. And Christy and I talk a lot about this crossroads, about how we're going to move forward, making that choice. And then fundamentally, once we've identified that choice, sourcing the courage through commitment, right? Finding that choice, making a commitment, and to act. And courage coming from the word Latin for cor, meaning heart, that it's also inside of us. So I also talk about these mindsets as like sort of a triangle. And at any given point, if I flip to the right version of a mindset for me, I then can find a way to move forward.
And Brian, I want to name what you just said about our team, right? We kind of work with these mindsets differently. So I want to encourage all of you as we move through these mindsets, how did you engage with them? Is it something that's a collective, as Brian said, this kind of triangle that he's flipping through? Because for me, I actually access it through a progression. From curiosity, I can lead to choice, I can move into courage. And I've worked with other people and they have a different way that they engage with this. These are your mindsets. So I encourage you, how do you engage with this?
Yeah, the 3 C's, right?
The 3 C's.
First off, I have an opportunity to talk about curiosity, and even the images that you see here. We are constantly reminded thematically and in life the curiosity and wonder of a child, how great it would be to approach life with that same curiosity. And that's part of that invitation, as well as the cat that we see or the puppy that's in your life. And that ultimately it's something that we can commit to cultivating in our own lives. And just that simple guiding question, what don't I know about this, right? And a dimension of humility as we enter into a new situation. Well, in addition to just this naming of curiosity, For me and understanding myself and looking at things, I have to notice, right? We can perceive what is and all the different nuances in myself or in others. I can leave for wonder and opportunity, that there's something emerging in front of us as we look at it. And as that information comes in through the noticing and the wondering, I can start to make assessments about myself, about others, and then ultimately and possibly move into that choice. But really hovering with that idea of curiosity is sort of encapsulated for me in this wonderful quote, right? It's that curiosity has its own reason for existing. And I always found that so fascinating, that instinct, that dimension of our human existence that can lead to discovery, to something new, something non-linear that we didn't know was there beforehand. So for us, putting on that mindset of curiosity is an access point to all the other pieces of possibility on that resilience continuum. So curiosity, fundamental and first of the mindsets.
And thank you, Brian, can lead us right into that second mindset of choice. And I want to stop for a second and just, again, just like what this webinar is not, what this mindset is not. This is not, Brian Kness touched on it at the beginning, a choice of the external things coming at you that we do not have choice over. The last few years have taught us that do not have a lot of choices. The mask mandates, coronavirus, all the things that we've had to pivot and move through. We had micro choices, how we experience the external and what happens, but we cannot change what's happening outside of our world, outside of our houses. We haven't left our houses in a while, at least at Dovetail, we're still completely remote. So I want to just make that distinction. We're talking about the inner choices that we have, how I receive and perceive and react are choices we actually get to make at these micro levels throughout the day. And what is a choice really? Let's break that down a little bit. You have to decide. A choice happens. You're making a decision in that moment. You commit to that and then you practice that. There's a lot of times that we kind of make choices, but you don't move through the process of actually committing to that. So we practice this process and acknowledging that, also practicing when we get to make these choices. And we talk a lot about how we practice our skills, and it's another webinar, we'll be talking about our skills, but it's a choice you get to make to engage with resilience, right? So you can choose to be more resilient in that moment. And a great quote, if you choose not to decide, you're still making a choice. Choices are happening all the time, everywhere, every moment. Whether you're choosing to eat the salad or not choosing to eat the salad, whether you're choosing to go for the walk or not go for the walk, or you're choosing to open that email you should open or not open that email. All of those pieces, you're having them every second of the day. So I'm inviting you to think about choice with what I call with intention. I'm making deliberate, intentional choices when I'm looking at my own personal, relational, or group resilience.
Fantastic. And just as we're hovering on that, as we transition into courage, right, decide, that suffix side, and I mentioned it's, the insecticide, there's a killing off, there's a moment of departure, and even this stepping into courage or a jumping off point for that is, once you've even discerned that, you have to make the move. And I mentioned it a bit earlier that courage comes from the heart, and that it is in us, but that it is not always something that we know right away, and that courage can happen in so many dimensions. And I want to sort of whittle away at that idea of, a superhero courage in the face of danger. It's a massive dimension of courage being sourced, but rather how mundane and in the moments that courage needs to make itself known because of our relational resilience, our moments with our families or in our partners, that courage, the face of courage can look like speaking authentically or taking a stand, as we say, against something. And ultimately, sometimes it takes a tremendous amount of courage to accept things as they are and not as we would have them. So I just want to offer up that for me, courage has historically, I thought of it in the big C courage, but so much of what happens and makes resilience possible is really through the courage and accessing our own skills. and that there's a larger value at play here. What kind of difference do I want to make? And so if I'm accepting that I want agency, I want to be of this world and move to a world of kind, connected human beings, that's incumbent upon me in all the micro interactions, and sort of leveraging what Christy was saying there in the small moments too. But my resilient mindset, if ultimately leveraged and done well, at scale, transformative for our world. And obviously Nelson Mandela is a shining example of the cultural resilience that his courage was acknowledging, but then ultimately helped move and usher in, right? Not in any one battle or moment, but a collective series of moments over a lifetime can be transformative and create that world that we as a company are inviting and hoping together.
I really like that, Brian. I was stuck in my head for a moment because in my mind, I'm thinking of like this really big Superman courage stance. And then like, oh, I noticed I'm off center. High five, go courage. You acknowledge the part of yourself, or all those little micro moments. But if we could actually stamp that big, ta-da, I was courageous. I could see celebrating those mini little micro moments.
Oh no, I like
so
that
much
idea.
fun.
Right,
right. Pop into my head while you were talking.
A little mini superhero in all of us at all times.
Exactly.
There you go.
And with these mindsets, the curiosity, choice, and courage, again, I want to encourage you to, how do you interact with that? Think about that for a moment. How do these mindsets occur to you? Because for me, as I mentioned before, it's a process that I move through, that with curiosity, I can move into choice, and then I can be courageous. And it's a process that I happen. And Brian, you spoke about it a little bit, but how about your thoughts on that menu progression process?
Right. So I think it's sort of a rough tumbler of a machine for me. I have a sort of mechanistic version of this where I'm trying to locate myself. If I decide and notice I want to be more resilient, or something's being called for, what piece of that sort of triangle, the delta of change, if I find myself not where I want to be, there's something in that change dimension of these mindsets that can get me to the next step. And that's what I found very useful when I feel quote unquote stuck. The first step is putting on this hat, progressing through these in one or so dimensions. And then also, and we'll talk about this a bit later, is naming one of those skills. So that gives me strength, which I think you're going to talk to a little bit more specifically, correct?
Absolutely. And what we want to do is pull these mindsets and actually give some concrete examples of how we've engaged with them, so it can kind of cement what that looks like. And for me, I'm someone who I've struggled with anxiety my whole life, worked really hard on it. And when I can be curious and I can be open, I can have that wonder, that childlike wonder, and I remove the conclusive thinking, conclusive listening, sometimes conclusive feelings, sensations, even in your body as an anxious person, I can actually be like, oh, I wonder what that is. I wonder what they mean, as opposed to, oh, that's obviously something really bad, or that's obviously something meant to hurt me, or that's obviously, we jump to these conclusions. And so by being open and curious, we can actually engage not only with our own personal self, but the world around us as well, which can allow us to be more connected. And one of the connecting skills I'd like to share with you, and how curiosity applies to that, is our heartfelt listening skill. And the key to heartfelt listening is the openness, the wonder, the non-conclusive listening. I know we are all guilty of making an assumption about what we think we're about to hear. And I know recently I had a moment where I was not my most resilient self. I was not wearing my curious mindset on my head. And I was practicing heartfelt listening, but not truly. I was not open. And my husband had something going on. I made an assumption I knew what it was. And then he was frustrated, rightly so, because I wasn't truly being open. So I had the opportunity, and I'm going to name this because you can retroactively apply this process. And I went, stop, hold the phone. I'm going to put on that curious hat. I'm going to re-engage and say, I'm so sorry. I was making an assumption about what was going on with you. Let's start that again. And we were able to reset that moment, which allowed us to be more resilient with one another, that relational resilience. And so it's important that when we are curious, we are listening without judgment. we're, again, not conclusive listening. I'm making the assumption I know where the next person's going to go, and being truly open and in that moment of wonder. Uh, Brian, what resilient mindset resonates with you?
Well, I'm also sitting with, and reacting. It's hard not to sort of be in the moment with you. And I just am appreciating you modeling that progression. It's how we learn. It's one of the things I miss about our in-person time in the office, is that we get to learn from each other through the modeling of these very simple and, again, mundane but super important dimensions of practicing resilience in day-to-day life. And so I'm like,
Well, it's something
great
you
job.
just mentioned.
I do that all the time.
We can
I
mess
jump
up
in.
and still be resilient, right? That's the main
right.
thing for you to really understand. It is inside you, whether or not a mistake has been made, right? We get to do redos, we get to do retakes, and that's what's so important about working with this approach.
Oh yeah, no, fabulous stuff. And dimension of speaking authentically, which sometimes takes a little bit of me, courage, right? So kind of transitioning from that. And, as we read this quote here, fear is a reaction, courage is a decision. My wife first introduced me to the idea that fear is actually an acronym of false evidence appearing real. Which then sometimes makes us reactive because of a fear dimension within us. And I've subsequently heard that and seen that in other ways, in other forms. But this resilient mindset of courage was something that, as a father coming into the holidays, and as I start to expand my role as father and trying to be the type of parent that I want to be, I have to admit that fear, when I'm being my least resilient self, some fear in some way is creeping in. And so if I've been curious about a situation, if I've even decided that I'm not my most resilient self and I'm making a choice to use a skill, one of the things that gets in my way is not really knowing enough, right? So when I say I'm curious, I'm noticing myself, when I'm noticing my reactivity, it actually takes a tremendous amount of courage to turn that lens inward to my own thoughts, my emotions, my reactions, and my state of being. Because within this resilience continuum, if I'm reactive in my protective patterns, I'm not really open to sort of anything else but my own safety and security. And if I would like to be more resilient personally, I've found I feel judgment from either my spouse or a work context or some cultural idea that, a breadwinner, right? Money's always a problem, but it helps me, courage helps me face myself and really be honest with where I am so I can make that informed decision. So courage is actually sort of cyclical and sends me back to a deep curiosity about myself, and the centering skill of noticing myself requires a tremendous amount of courage. And so I just kind of want to point out that this phrase, pause, what's the cause, is one of our ways to help people access our centering skills, theoretically, and hopefully people, as they're looking at our various centering skills and connecting skills, can find access points. And it's always been historically, what's the cause? Where is this dimension of distrust or whatever that protective pattern is that's coming up for me? It takes some courage to face it, because sometimes the answer lies within me. I'm the problem here. And so all that in service to having some authentic conversations with my children in developmentally appropriate ways about health and life and death. And so I just want to say that the courage of noticing myself allowed me then to use the other skills. And this is part of our model here. Historically, when we feel fear, we traditionally, or we talk about freeze, fight, or flight as one reactive pattern to whatever that source of fear is. And we've located some of those in our protective patterns across the flight, fright, fight, and freeze domains. But when we talk about courage and sourcing that, it's about using the skills to face and or stand and or to move forward. And so that's ultimately the opportunity given to us. If we wear the resilient mindsets, then we can practice the skills to move
Well,
forward.
and I think, Brian, it's so great you mentioned our protective patterns. We're not going into that part of our reactive resilience. You can learn about that on our website. They're listed here. We'll be sending this slide deck to everyone who's on the call and who couldn't join us today. But just to name that the curiosity and the choice and the courage working all together in that process of facing what might be a stress, a stressor that's coming at us, and how we interact with that. And our stress response really is that fight, flight, or freeze, right? Because the stressor is coming our way, whether we want to try to avoid it or not.
And it's so empowering to say, even though I'm kind of freaking out, I find myself, I want to be better, I want to do better, I want to face, how do I do that? And that's ultimately was the root of our program, right? We always said we wanted to be practical, strength-based, and skills-based. And then we built this out because it doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? Usually my own resilience is affected by people in my lives or groups I'm a part of. So, there's some wonderful resources. This is just a list of then the skills I can use once I've gone through that resilient progression with my mindset and found myself on the resilience continuum.
Absolutely. And these skills, you can download individual handouts completely free on our website, breaking down personal resilience, relational resilience, and group resilience, protective patterns, as we just mentioned, and cultural resilience as well, along with a lot of other resources. But what we wanted to focus on is that there are simple research-based skills that you can access to develop and strengthen your own resilience with that foundation, that when we have those resilient mindsets on, it becomes easier for one to access.
Yeah, just to hover here to your point. And, coming in the late 20, close to a half an hour, like we mentioned here. And then just the last point, we have circles for resilience work. I think when we say the term join a circle, that's actually what we call our resilience circle, which focuses on our personal resilient arc, learning about our protective patterns and our centering skills over 6 weeks. And just inviting people at this time to populate or jump in or pop in with any questions that you might have with what we said, or anything else that seems to come to mind.
Yes, any questions, please. There's still some coming in, so I'll give a second. And the other piece is everything's available on our website to download for free, and we do have physical copies of all of our resources as well on our store. How do you say it, Brian? If it costs us to make it, we have to sell it. But if we like to go ahead,
if it costs us to make it, it costs you. But that's not our goal. That's not our mission.
No, we want everything to be available as a digital download. But I'm not a Kindle user. I personally still like to hold a book in my hands. My kids make fun of me, but that's just my mindset and how I'm able to learn and access pieces. So we have some questions coming in. Okay, so first one is, how do I engage these mindsets in preparation for a stressful situation? For example, a work meeting that I'm feeling stressed about. Brian, what are your thoughts on how do you use this?
Yeah, I love that it's so specific. You use the word already, anticipatory resilience, right? So self-awareness is that I need to be getting ready for a stressful work meeting, right? And inherently, I would start with the first of the mindsets, being curious to what is. And part of work, or in former work situations, never at Dovetail, but really authentically not there. I don't ever make assumptions, or I really work away from the assumption that someone's judging me. And that's a work culture that we fostered, but also I found that the curiosity that the story is in me. So what inherently makes something stressful isn't the event, but our response to it. So if we can use anticipatory resilience, we can also be curious about the story we're telling ourselves, that maybe perhaps you feel like you're going to be sniped, or so there's some attacking going on from a colleague, right? That would then make me curious about that relational resilience. And so if I can stay with curiosity, then I can make choices about how could I get ahead of this, right? A stressful situation, speak authentically to the person. I know we've been working in these ways, but perhaps at this meeting we can, right? So, and that would take courage. So right there, we see the whole arc of possibility. But for me, the first one is curiosity. What story I'm telling myself about this event that is yet to occur, and what steps I can then take to help alleviate or mine out, as we like to say, what that source of that stress is, internally or externally.
And I love what you just said, Brian, the event that has yet to occur. Right. We can get lost in our own stories that we've created, and we can truly be open and be in wonderment. We're not conclusively already knowing what the outcome of said event might be. So I just want to encourage that non-conclusive thinking, non-conclusive listening, really being present. There's a lot of that presencing and mindfulness that we all work on, but truly being present is to be open and curious, because we don't know what's coming next. We make assumptions with all the information we're receiving, but we're not sure what the outcome might be, right? So just being open to that and being okay with it. And it takes some practice, I think, being open. So this next one is really interesting. Speaking of curiosity, what happens if I put on this mindset and I find myself going down a curious rabbit hole of never-ending curiosity? And I find this really interesting because as someone, as I mentioned, who has struggled with anxiety and other mental health issues, I am well versed in the rabbit hole that can occur. But I move back into the lack of conclusion, the non-conclusive thinking. If I'm going down a rabbit hole, I'm making an assumption that it's going to go left or right, right? I'm making this decision to continue pursuing whatever thought experiment's happening up in your brain in the middle of the night. That's when mine happened, 3 a.m. But the truth is that to be truly open, you're not moving down a rabbit hole. That's how I experience that, because I don't know where the hole is going. I don't know where this thought experiment is going, but to be open to what is, as opposed to jumping to what might be. And that's a little bit different than perpetual curiosity, because curiosity is open and wonderment, as opposed to
the word that's coming to mind is perseverating. We're in a loop, right? So if we become aware, we can make a choice to nurture myself, break the cycle, take a walk. So even that awareness is when you're harping on or perseverating on a concept piece and not moving to another outcome, then we've sort of built our own little mind cage.
I like the mind cage.
Mind cage. That's the new one that will be in our next work. And I thought this was a more simple kind of practical one. It says join the circle there, and there was a question about, does it cost to join a circle? And I would say no. Great question, in the sense that we would love for our time. There's a suggested price, but also if you notice in the registration, there will be, if money is an object or something that you want to alleviate that burden for that cost to attend, that's something, there's a code there to make joining a circle also free, living in our values.
Thank you for saying that, Brian, because it is a core belief of ours that we never want financial hardships or concerns to be a barrier to your personal, relational, or group resilience. So it's so important to note that we literally are walking the walk, talking your talk, and supporting that idea of open education resource at every point. And with that, this was fun, Brian. This was a great experience.
Always. I always learn a little too, and I appreciate when we do it through a conversation style or with a co-presenter. I always learn a lot and want to bring it to my circles.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. Do appreciate it, and you can expect a PDF of the slides, a recording, and additional resources. Let me see, make sure I hit everything. I saw one little thing come in. Oh, you're welcome. And thank you all very much. So with that, I say thank you, and we're off.